All right, welcome back, everyone. So, for the last 2 weeks, we've really been doing the prep work, right? We've talked about the epoche, the eidetic reduction, basically learning how to clear the tables so we can actually do our work. Today, we're moving from all that preparation to the absolute core of the practice, the act of description itself. And the key that unlocks all of it is getting a real handle on Husserl's concept of intentionality. Okay, so to get into this, we're not going to start with some dense philosophical theory. Instead, let's start with something we've all felt. It's this really common human experience that I like to call the explanatory itch.
I want you to just take a second and think about a time you were completely floored by something. Maybe a piece of music, a painting, or, just a sunset. And in that moment of just pure awe, a question pops into your head. And it almost always sounds something like this. Wow. Why? Why is this so beautiful?
Now, our default mode, the way we've all been trained to think, is to immediately scratch that itch with a causal answer. We jump straight to science. We'll say, oh, it's dopamine flooding my brain, or it's the physics of the harmonic frequencies, or maybe something sociological, like it's just my cultural conditioning. And look, those answers might be totally correct in their own fields, but do they actually answer our question? Do they tell us anything about the experience of beauty? Phenomenology says no, not at all. They actually sidestep the real question, which is about the experience itself. What is this feeling? How does it appear to me? What does it all mean?
Wittgenstein just nails this. He points out that giving a causal explanation doesn't get rid of our aesthetic puzzlement. Knowing the chemical compounds that make a rose smell like a rose doesn't explain the pleasantness of it. The cause just isn't the reason. And for us, as phenomenologists, we're hunting for the reasons, the meaning, not the chemical causes. So, if we're not supposed to explain, what on earth are we supposed to do? Well, this brings us to the number one most important rule for all the philosophical work you're going to do. We have to learn to describe, not explain. This quote from Merleau-Ponty, this is our new mantra. He actually calls this a forswearing of science. Now, that sounds dramatic, but it doesn't mean we're suddenly anti-science. Of course not. It just means that for our specific job as phenomenologists, we are intentionally putting aside that scientific impulse to break everything down into its little component parts and look for chain of causes. We're interested in the whole, meaningful experience exactly as we live it. And I mean this is a firm rule for our work in here. When we substitute that causal explanation with a phenomenological description, we're making a really disciplined, methodical choice. It's tough because it forces us to stay right there with the experience itself, which is actually much harder, but believe me, it's way more rewarding. And check out how Heidegger frames this. It's so powerful. He says the word description should be treated like a prohibition. It's a stop sign. It forbids us from saying anything about an experience that cannot be directly pointed to, directly demonstrated in the experience itself. So if you can't point to it in the phenomenon, you can't put it in your description, period. This is what makes our work rigorous. No guesswork, no theories, just sticking to what actually shows up. This analogy right here is perfect. This is our job. We're not geologists of the mind. We're not analyzing the chemical soil of consciousness. We are meticulous map makers of the world of experience. Our job is to draw a faithful map of the landscape, to chart the structures of the lived world so that other people can see it too. Okay, so if we're going to be good map makers, we need the right tools, right? And the most fundamental tool we have for describing this landscape of experience is understanding the very structure of consciousness itself. For Husserl, that structure is called intentionality. This is such a game-changing idea. Consciousness isn't some passive container, like a box that ideas just fall into. For Husserl, consciousness is an act. It's a process. It's always reaching out, always about something, always directed toward an object. It doesn't matter if that object is a real tree outside, a memory from when you were 5, or a complex mathematical idea. Consciousness is always consciousness of something.
So this structure, this being directed towards something, means that every single conscious act has two distinct sides. You've got the act itself on the one hand, and then you've got the object as it's being seen or thought about on the other. And Husserl gives us two technical terms to help us analyze this.
And here they are, our brand new tools, noesis and noema. The noesis is the act part, the how of our experience. So the act of perceiving, the act of remembering, the act of judging. The noema is the object part, the what of our experience. But, and this is so crucial, it's not the object in itself, it's the object as it is experienced, as it is meant in that particular act. So it's the perceived tree, the remembered birthday, the judged situation. So you see the pattern here, right? For every noetic act of seeing, there's a noematic correlate, the seen. For every act of fearing, there's a correlate, the feared. For every act of valuing, there's a correlate, the valued. Your job as a phenomenologist is to describe this relationship, this inseparable pair. You literally can't describe one without describing the other. All right, now we have our tools. We've got our prohibition against causal explanations, and we've got our noetic noematic structure. So let's go all the way back to our original question about beauty and actually put these tools to work. We are now going to perform that radical shift we talked about. We are completely setting aside the why question. We're just not asking it. Our new job is to map the intentional structure of that aesthetic moment. We're going to describe the correlation between our act of experiencing beauty and the beautiful thing as it is being experienced. Okay, this table breaks it down for us. Let's just walk through it together. Look at the top row, the art object. On the noetic side, that's the how we do it, we perform an act of aesthetic differentiation. That just means we actively ignore the painting's price tag or who used to own it. And what's the result? Well, the noematic correlate, the what then appears, is the pure work of art. It shows up as this unified thing that just shines. Okay, now the middle row, the feeling. The noetic act is one of valuing, that feeling of being completely transported. The correlate to that act, the noema, is the aesthetic feeling itself, which now appears as a meaningful, complex whole. And finally, look at our stance. The noetic act is a kind of disinterested attention. We're not trying to use the art for anything. And its correlate? The object appears to us as an end in itself, something valuable just for being what it is. See how that works? So here's the big payoff. This is the crucial insight our description gives us. Beauty isn't some magic property hidden inside an object. And it's not just some random subjective feeling inside our heads. It's a product of this correlation, this dance between the specific way we pay attention to the world, our noetic acts, and the meaning that shows up because of it, the noema. The how of our experiencing literally co-creates the what of our experience. Now, this whole method of describing the noetic noematic correlation, this isn't just a neat trick for your art history class. This is it. This is the fundamental practice for all the phenomenological work you're going to be doing. It doesn't matter if you're analyzing the experience of making a moral choice, or the structure of memory, or the perception of time itself. Your first move, every single time, is going to be this one. You suspend the hunt for causes, and you begin the hard work of describing the intentional structure of the experience. This is how you're going to use phenomenology to do real philosophy. And this brings us right back around to where we started a couple weeks ago. Remember the reduction? Heidegger describes it as a leading back. We're leading our attention back from the object that we just take for granted in everyday life to the correlation of noesis and noema that actually constitutes our experience of that object. We're leading our vision back to the very structure of how things appear to us. So, when you sit down to write your papers and you're staring at a blank screen, this slide is your roadmap. These are your steps. 1. Suspend the why question. Get rid of it. 2. Ask, what is this experience and how is it experienced? 3. Analyze the correlation. What's the specific noetic act and what's the specific noematic correlate? And finally, you describe that structure precisely without adding any pet theories that you can't actually point to in the experience itself. And remember, the goal here is not just to collect interesting stories about our feelings. We are following a strict, repeatable method to arrive at a systematic, rigorous philosophy. We are doing what Husserl always demanded. We're getting back to the things themselves. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Don't think about the psychological causes of regret or the social function of making a promise. Forget all that. Instead, start to think about the intentional structure. What is the noetic act of regretting? What does that feel like as an act? And what is its correlate, the regretted, as it appears to you? That kind of analysis is exactly what you'll be doing, and it's where we're headed next.